All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today, we are going to the second to last class in the 5th edition D&D Cross Final Fantasy XIV Classes and Races Compendium. Yeah, this has been a wild ride. Endwalker has launched. I have beaten the main story. I'm not going to even give my opinion on it because I want anyone that decides to play Endwalker to not have any idea about what's going to happen in this story. I think it is a well written enough story that you at least deserve to experience it without any sort of bias, and that includes an emotional bias where I go, oh, well, this, there are parts in it that made me really sad, or there are parts in it that made me super, super happy, and then I don't want people to go into it with any sort of expectation. So yes, that being said, yeah, so now that I've done that, I'm actually leveling a Reaper. I may look at the Reaper and Sage that are in the updated version of this. I may not for a little bit. I've been doing this for like 6 months now or something like that. Like, I'm getting a little bit burnt out on Final Fantasy stuff. I would like to go back to some regular D&D for a little bit. But I don't know. But as far as right now, we're going to start with the White Mage. Another class that has been in Final Fantasy since the first game. Again, in the first game, you had 6 classes you could choose from. You had Fighter, Thief, Black Belt, Black Mage, White Mage, and Red Mage. We have covered all of those in various forms, except for the White Mage. White Mage in Final Fantasy XIV was one of the original classes you can play. The White Mage shows up in the original opening movie for Final Fantasy XIV Online. Not a Realm Reborn, not the upgraded, good version of it. No, the original crappy version of Final Fantasy XIV that bombed massively before Yoshi P came in and fixed everything. Yeah. White Mage has always been there. Every single Final Fantasy has a White Mage in it in some way, shape, or form. They are not always called a White Mage, but they have characters that specialize in healing magics, which is what the White Mage does. The original White Mage was really, really limited. It had almost exclusively support-based spells, except for Dia, which was effectively just a group spell that only damaged undead creatures. Due to the fact that the first, no, I'm thinking of a completely different. I'm thinking Final Fantasy III. Anyway, the Dia spell was remarkably useful. Mostly because you did find a fair number of undead enemies, but outside of undead enemies, the White Mage could not do anything offensive. They later, as it kind of evolved in Final Fantasy II, there were no quote unquote classes, but if I remember, was it Minwu? That was, I think, one of the guest characters, because in Final Fantasy II, you have a party of 4 characters, but one of them, Leon, starts in the very beginning as part of the party and then gets whisked off, and that's part of the plot that I won't reveal. And you only have 3 characters, and then you almost always have a 4th bonus character. and they all have different abilities and things like that. And Minwu is one of the first that you get. And if I remember correctly, Minwu is effectively a white mage with some extra stuff. Final Fantasy III had White Mage as one of the first classes you got from the first crystal. Final Fantasy IV, Rosa was your White Mage. Final Fantasy V, White Mage again, first crystal. Final Fantasy VI, I'm trying to remember. I can't remember who was the White Mage in Final Fantasy VI, but I will guarantee there was at least one, if not multiple. If you remember, put it in there. Final Fantasy VII, Aerith effectively took the role of White Mage because most of her limit breaks were defensive or healing in nature. Final Fantasy VIII was fucked up in general, but you could create a White Mage. I'm trying to think. I don't think any of the limit breaks really fit into the idea of a White Mage. Because Selphie was effectively a black mage. Irvine shot things. Zell was a monk. Questus was a blue mage, and Renoa did stuff with her dog. Renoa was the closest to a white mage because some of her limit breaks had healing properties. She was kind of like the Aerith of 8. 9, Dagger, whom eventually you learn her real name. Is it 10, Yuna, who's a white mage and is a summoner. 11, it was a class. 12, in the Zodiac Age, one of the jobs you can pick is White Mage. 13, we don't talk about 13, but there was one of the roles you could have was effectively a White Mage. I can't remember what it was called, but it existed. And then we're into 14. Like, White Mages have always existed. Some of the kind of defining features of the White Mage in general, they can only wear robes and use a staff. In some games, they also gain the ability to use a bow, so they do have some martial abilities. But for the most part, it's just staves. Or staves, I think is the plural. And yeah, it's a really simple class, but it's essential in most Final Fantasy games. It is the person that keeps you alive. 5th edition, on the other hand, doesn't work like a video game, and as much as the traditional D&D party from original D&D all the way up to 5th edition is you have a wizard, a fighter, a cleric, and a rogue. That is your traditional D&D party, and they do kind of fit in to the idea of the Holy Trinity of the tank DPS type thing, but D&D in general doesn't work that way, and 5th edition itself doesn't really work that way. Healing is not quite the same as it is in an RPG. I've talked about it before, but generally, with a few rare exceptions, the best time to use your heals is when your allies are unconscious, because it brings them back to consciousness. For most of the low-level heals, that is the best time to use them. As you get to higher levels, you start getting more unique heals and things like that that have uses outside of just bringing back people. But for the most part, clerics in 5th edition, which would be the equivalent of what a white mage would be, are very, very different. Clerics have a lot of weapon proficiencies. Clerics have a lot of offensive capabilities. They are nothing like the white mage in Final Fantasy, where it is almost useless offensively and mostly a defensive class, because in Final Fantasy, you get to play a team of characters. So having one that is mostly defensive isn't that bad. In D&D, you are playing only a single character, and if the only thing you ever get to do is heal other people, it becomes very boring very, very quickly. That's one of the things that 4th edition introduced to change how healers work, because people didn't like playing the cleric, because despite the fact that clerics could do a ton more than what a white mage can do, clerics a lot of time had to use their action every turn to keep their allies alive, and it just wasn't fun. So 4th edition introduced the idea of most of the heal abilities for your leaders, which were the healers in 4th edition, were minor actions. So you could still do your major action and do something cool, and then as a minor action, you could heal someone. And that changed the game. It was now fun to play a cleric. And 5th edition kind of did a hybrid of that. Clerics still have, they have Healing Word is an absolutely essential spell for any cleric to have, because it allows you to heal with a bonus action, but is a very low power heal. You only do it, I believe it's a D4 or maybe 2D4 of health. For the life of me, I can't remember how much Healing Word heals. Hold, please. How in the world can I not remember Healing Word? The easiest... Sorry, I have to look this up because I feel super stupid. Yeah, it's just a single D4 plus your spellcasting modifier, and then casting at higher levels adds additional D4. Healing Word in general is never going to be a super effective thing of keeping your allies alive, but it is the most effective thing of bringing allies back. And so it is one of the most used healing spells, and it allows the cleric to still do other things, whether it's casting a cantrip or using one of their other abilities that lets them, do cool things. It allows them to do a little bit of both, and that's what we like. So how is the White Mage, which even in Final Fantasy XIV, where you are just playing the White Mage, with the fact that you are using literally every 2 seconds effectively, you're using one or two different abilities, it is a completely different experience playing someone that mostly just heals in an MMO than it is in a tabletop RPG. So let's see how they kind of bridge that gap. And even in Final Fantasy XIV, one of the mechanics of the White Mage is the Blood Lily, which is after they do some of their special healing every so often, they can use their Blood Lily to do crazy amounts of damage. So let's see how this one goes. So let's start with the overall class features. Hit points, D6, exactly what we were kind of expecting. I know clerics in general, I believe they start with a D8. And that's simply because I'm going to look it up before I say the wrong thing. Yeah, it's a D8. And that's simply because clerics are a little bit more frontline than wizards, which are the wizards, and I think maybe sorcerers are the only other classes that start with a D6 for their hit dice, and they're meant to be squishy. So this is taking that idea of, okay, the White Mage is going to be a squishy, so they're meant to stay in the back and not wade into combat and things. So D6, they have proficiency with no armor. For weapons, they're proficient with daggers, darts, slings, quarterstaffs, and light crossbows. I do find it slightly interesting that they gave them proficiency with daggers, simply because in most Final Fantasies, proficiency with daggers is something that is exclusive to the Black Mage as far as the spellcasters are concerned. So I find it kind of interesting they gave them daggers. Also, I kind of would have liked to see them add in the short bow, just as a nod to Rosa and a bunch of other White Mages that were able to use short bows throughout Final Fantasy. So it'd be the only thing. I don't think it would massively change much, especially since they don't get extra attack or anything. So light crossbow versus short bow is not really going to be a huge difference. So yeah, tools, none. Saving throws are wisdom and charisma. Makes sense. Skills, choose 2 from Arcana, Deception, Insight, Persuasion, History, Religion, and Medicine. And then your starting equipment, dagger, spellcasting, focus, an explorer's pack, or a scholar's pack. Super easy, super simple. Nothing in this is surprising. Going to level 1. The first thing you get is spellcasting. It's effectively, it's cleric spellcasting. you prepare your spells in the morning every day. This is one of the first classes where I actually went and looked at the spell list before getting an opinion about the classes itself, simply because, as we'll find out in the rest of the class, there's nothing offensive about this class. There's not a single ability that can be used offensively in the entirety of the class, and most of the subclasses don't have any offensive abilities either, which isn't something you can do in 5th edition. You cannot have an entirely defensive class. It just doesn't work. You have to have something you can do offensively. So because of that, I wanted to look into the spell list, because I'm like, well, maybe just all of the offensive abilities are in the spell list itself, which would make perfect sense. A lot of the cleric's offensive abilities are spell based. And they're not. There are a few offensive spells, but they're really limited. Like, you might have only 1 or 2 per level. Per spell level, I mean. And that worries me a little bit. Because, again, D&D is not a video game. You cannot have a character that their only job is to keep the other characters alive. No one wants to play that job. Even in earlier editions where clerics, that's kind of the role they got forced into often, they still had some massively powerful spells that were exclusive to the cleric. Things like Flame Strike and versions of it have always been a cleric spell for a very, very long time. Divine Intervention and things like that would have offensive abilities depending on your deity. And clerics could wear armor and use weapons. So bare minimum, they could walk in and bop people, whereas the White Mage can't. So I would say look at the spell list, add a few more offensive spells. Is really the only thing. You should have at least 2 or 3 for every level, choices of offensive kind of spells. Doesn't mean they have to pick them every single time, but you should have something in the base class. You shouldn't have to rely on a subclass to be able to do anything off of offensive. So that's the only thing I have about the spellcasting is, maybe look over the spell list. And add, change out a couple of spells, because it is really, really passive. Other than it has, I think, almost every summoning spell in the game. For some odd reason, the White Mage has literally almost every other summoning spell. So their only offensive thing they can do is summon other creatures to fight for them, which is not a White Mage thing and has never been a White Mage thing. That's a summoner thing. And as well as much as Yuna kind of combined the White Mage and the summoner, that was because summoning was really, really different in Final Fantasy X. Overall, I would probably get rid of a few of the summoning spells because they don't make sense for a White Mage, and just give them some more traditional damage-based spells. As we're about to find out, the class is already complicated enough, doesn't need more complexity. So, moving forward, before we do this next thing, quick reminder on 5th edition class design. In 5th edition D&D, every class is designed to play very differently right from the beginning. In order to do this, there are these things that we call defining features. A defining feature is something either unique to the class, or maybe not unique, but the class gets it earlier, or can use it in a different way than any other class. And in order for something to be a defining feature, it has to show up in the first 2 levels. So, we are about to talk about the White Mage defining feature. And I'm going to be very upfront about this. This is dumb. This is beyond needlessly complex. This is dumb. The idea is dumb. I'm not saying the person that wrote it is dumb or anything like that, but this is almost insult level bad design. It goes against everything that 5th edition. This would be bad design in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. That is how needlessly complex this is. So what is it? Well, at first level, you get Confession. Beginning at first level, you gain the bonus action Prayer. When you use Prayer, you gain a charge of Confession. When you use Prayer while you already have a charge of Confession, you double the number of charges you currently have, then gain 1 charge. You may hold a number of Confession charges equal to your proficiency bonus. You must be in combat to use Prayer. Your Confession charges fade away after spending 1 minute outside of combat. Oh dear God, why? So, first of all, burning your bonus action to just gain a resource is not something that is done in D&D 5th edition ever. Because it doesn't feel good. Burning any action to simply generate a resource that you then have to use another action to utilize is bad action economy. You are now limiting your action economy. You are actually reducing the number of actions you get to take in combat because you have to burn one of your actions, in this case a bonus action, to generate a resource so that you can use another action. This is such a bad design. Now, combine that with the whole you double and then add 1 more. Why? Why in the world does that need to be a thing? First of all, until you hit level 9, you know what that means? When you do it once, you get 1 charge. When you do it twice, you get 2 charges. That's all. For the majority of the time this class exists, that is all that means. It is the most needlessly complicated thing ever. There's no reason for it. It is absolutely bogus. Why in the world, first of all, burning a bonus action to get a resource? Okay. Why do you need to gain more resources the more resources you already have? Why is that a thing? Is it because your higher level abilities just require more things? Oh, easy way to fix that, make them require less things. Is it because, as you'll see here, you can burn multiple charges of it to increase the power? And you want to, make sure that that's useful. Okay, make it level up like literally everything else in 5th edition. I am so angry about this ability because it is just so bad. It is so incredibly bad. And I don't get anywhere about what it comes from other than, what'd be really cool is if we could do something really confusing. Like, Confession is not a thing for the White Mage in Final Fantasy 14. Doesn't exist. The kind of mechanics of the White Mage, they are a heal over time healer. So a lot of their heals have the ability to heal for over time. So that's what they do. And their class gauge is the Lily gauge. Basically, the longer you're in combat, you gain these lilies. And then when you use a certain abilities, there are 2 different abilities you can use that burn lilies. One of them is a instant cast single target heal. Another one is an instant cast group heal. They're both very powerful. So basically, you earn lilies just from time passing. And then you burn them, and when you burn them after you reach a certain level, you fill the blood lily, and then when the blood lily is filled, you do lots of damage. Rinse, repeat. That's all it is. There's nothing about, actively using something to gain a charge of something that then doesn't exist in Final Fantasy XIV. It doesn't exist in D&D. It doesn't exist in any RPG I am currently aware of. That is just how bad this ability is. And what you use your prayers for, we'll get to them in a second. Your confessions for, we'll get to them, and that's another thing that really, really annoys me is you get the ability is called confession, but the bonus action is called prayer, and then when you pray, you get a charge of confession. There's just too many names here. It doesn't need to have that many. Again, it's complexity for complexity's sake. I made an argument once on a video where I talked about a new version of chess I created called More Chess! And basically, more chess! Every single unit has a different way to move. and a different way to take pieces. Like pawns can move one step forward, but then on turns that on alternating terms, they can move left to right and then forward. Whereas knights can do, and I made up these completely bogus rules that were unbelievably complex. And my point was, does that mean more chess is a better game than chess? No, chess is a perfect game. There's not really anything you can add to chess to make it a better game. It is a game based entirely on strategy and logic. There's a lot more to chess than a lot of people understand, and a lot of winning in chess involves understanding how board positions work. It's not even about dealing with the pieces themselves. It's about board position in general. You take pictures, professional chess players take pictures of the board in their mind, and they compare them to other things that have happened when the board is in that same position. And it's also reading your opponent and learning how to kind of bait your opponent into different things, using their own knowledge against them. It's an incredibly interesting and advanced game. And simply adding more confusing rules to it doesn't make it a better game. It makes it a worse game. It makes it significantly less useful. And that's what this is. This is just unbelievably needlessly complex for a very simple thing, which is we are giving them a limited resource so they can do things with it. That's all this is. And this is my suggestion to fix this, because giving them a limited resource, that's name of the game in this supplement. Every class has a limited resource. I'm not a big fan of it, but to be perfectly honest, it was the only way I could think of to make this class work. Give them a limited resource. It'll make them play differently, and that's what you want. This is what I think. Confession, change it to prayer. Get rid of the word confession. If you're going to use the word prayer, it's just called prayer. Prayer. Beginning at first level, you can pray to the 12 to empower one of your spells. If you're not unaware, the 12 are effectively the kind of the gods of Eorzea. They're not primals or anything like that. To be perfectly honest, we have no idea what the 12 are. But when people would say something that would normally be like, thank God this happened, they go, thank the 12. So that's what I'm referencing here. I thought adding a little bit of lore would just make it more fun. So you can pray to the 12 to empower one of your spells. As a bonus action, you can add a prayer effect to the next spell you cast. I'm going to put on that turn. You can use this ability of numbered times equal to your proficiency bonus and regain all expended use after a short or long rest. That's it. Massively simple. It gives you a limited resource. You don't have to burn your bonus action in order to gain the resource. You use your bonus action to augment one of your spells, which I think makes sense. Again, prayer doesn't exist in Final Fantasy XIV whatsoever. I'm looking through the abilities right now for the White Mage. They do not have a prayer ability anywhere. I don't know where they got this idea for. There's no confession ability in it, as far as I can tell. This just seems like this weird thing. Something I find kind of ironic. The confession mechanic is actually identical to a samurai mechanic. So I find it interesting that without intending to, I've chosen the last two classes that have the same broken mechanic. So I find that interesting. But yeah, there's no confession in the White Mage. There's no prayer in the White Mage. I don't know where they got this idea, other than Rosa in Final Fantasy IV had an ability called Prayer, which was just a really weak group heal. That's all it was, but it was free. So yeah, that's what I want to change confession to, and you're going to find out why I have such an issue with it in just a second here. So, moving forward. Also at level 1, you get 3 things at level 1, which, to be perfectly honest, this next one could have been a subheading of confession. It didn't need to be its own ability, but it makes sense. You get Reach of the Unseen. Also, beginning at first level, when you cast a spell, you may spend 1 charge of Confession to commission the elementals of the world to carry your spell. If your spell is a touch spell, you may cast it as a ranged spell up to a distance of 30 feet. This, actually kind of interesting. To my knowledge, there isn't an ability in 5th edition that does this exact thing. Find Familiar works kind of in a similar way, where you can cast touch-based spells at range, but you have to have a familiar there, and the familiar can die. So this, I actually don't have a huge issue with it. My only quote-unquote issue is after we change Confession to Prayer, it doesn't make sense, so I just reword it. At first level, you gain access to the Reach of the Unseen Prayer. This prayer taps into the natural ether currents of the world, showing that physical distance is relative to the 12. This prayer must be used on a spell with a range of touch. You may cast it this turn as if it had a range of 30 feet. It does the same thing. It just kind of changes things. You are still using your bonus action, but instead of just simply gaining a resource, you are using your bonus action to empower your spellcasting. And because the White Mage is a full spellcaster, that means this is always going to be useful. And as you get to higher levels, there are some pretty nasty touch-based spells that become really, really nasty when you turn them into range spells. So there isn't going to be a situation where this becomes less useful. Especially since some of the healing spells that you get can be very, very potent, but they require you to be very, very close. So this literally is always going to be useful. It's interesting. It's unique. And it works with the prayer mechanic. So, yeah. It's not that I have a problem with Reach of the Unseen. I have a massive problem with Confession because it's dumb. I'm sorry if this sounds like I'm attacking anyone that wrote this or defends it or anything. No, I do not think you are dumb if you think this is a good spell or anything like that. The Confession ability is dumb. It is pointless. It just makes needlessly complex. It is Marchess! And more is spelled M-O-A-R. Marchess! It's just dumb, and it infuriates me with just how bad it is. Especially since I know one person in particular has already told me they're going to try and defend it, and you can't. It is that bad. It is that bad an idea. It makes the class not work. It actively fights against action economy, which is the most important thing in 5th edition. Everything about it is bad. Moving to 2nd level, you get Conjury Discipline. It's your subclass. There are 3 classes, the Elementalist, Spirit Master, and Amdapori. If you're wondering where in the hell that word came from, there is a city called Amdapor that is the location of a couple different dungeons in the game. It's actually... they're fun. Like, I like the Amdapor dungeons. They're a lot of fun. So that's where that's from. We'll talk about those. I'm not sure if I'm going to do a different video for each one or if I'm going to cover them all in one. Because spellcasters in general, they don't have a ton of abilities that I have to talk about. Because most of their kind of fancy stuff is choosing their spells. That's why most spellcasters don't have a full spellcasters don't have a 3rd level ability, because your 3rd level ability is you get access to 2nd level spells. Your 5th level ability is you get access to 3rd level spells. So yeah, I might be able to cover them all in one video. I don't know yet. But anyway, so that's that. Moving on. Also at 2nd level, you get Afflatus Solace. Being at 2nd level is an action. You may spend any number of your Confession charges. Remember when I said, well, we need to be able to get more and more charges because you can burn multiple charges to do something good. I don't know why they've become Alex Jones now, but, you know, the White Mages are turning the frogs into other things. Like, and it's just going to kill everybody and turn the world, and it brings apart the end times. Yeah. That is really rough on the voice, by the way. So let's go back to this. As an action, you may spend any number of your confession charges. You heal a creature within 30 feet of you for a number of d4 plus your proficiency bonus, where the number is equal to the charges of confession spent. Your prayer bonus action cannot have been used before or after using Afflatus Solace. On your turn, the target creature must have more than 0 hit points. So if any of this sounds familiar, this is a worse version of Healing Word. Healing Word is a ranged spell. We've already talked about it once. It's a bonus action spell. This is an action that requires you to have previously spent a bonus action on a previous turn. This requires multiple turns of wasting actions. I just have to check Healing Word's range, because I think everything about this is just, everything about this is a worse version of Healing Word. Healing Word does 60 feet. This does 30 feet. Healing Word does a d4 plus your spellcasting. This does a d4 plus your spellcasting. But Healing Word can be used on creatures that are 0. That is almost the exclusive use of Healing Word, is bringing back allies that are unconscious. And you can only use this, bare minimum, you can only use this every other turn. Oh dear God. Why? The reason they do this is because Confession effectively, other than Reach of the Unseen, Confession allows you to cast spells without using your spell slots. It is the same problem as the Black Mage, where we are just giving a full spellcaster extra spells that they're allowed to cast with no limitation. It breaks the class. You don't get to give someone full spellcasting plus extra spells. And that is literally what Afflatus Solace is it is just, you could cast a really bad version of Healing Word for free if you're willing to waste a bunch of actions and put your team at a massive disadvantage for it. That is what Afflatus Solace is. And the reason it has all of those things is if it was just you can cast Healing Word using Confession, you would realize how massively broken Confession is as it relates to this. Because it's just, hey, we're going to give you free spells that you can cast at will. Nope, nada, zippo, zip, none. Get rid of it. It's dumb. It also has nothing to do with the White Mage. Afflatus Solace is a White Mage ability in Final Fantasy XIV. It's one of the things that actually burns a lily. And if I remember correctly, Afflatus Solace is an instant cast, really large single target heal. It's an 800 power cure ability, which is a massive. Most of your cures are between 100 and 400. Your good cures are 400. This is double that, and it's an instant cast. So nothing about Afflatus Solace in Final Fantasy XIV makes any sense with what it is. If you were to kind of do an apples to apples, changeover, Afflatus Solace should be a bonus action because it's an instant cast spell as opposed to a channel, an actual cast time spell. This is a cast time spell version of it. Afflatus Solace is one of the strongest cures you can have. This is one of the worst cures you can possibly have. The only thing that's the same is you can't cure someone back to consciousness in Final Fantasy XIV. You have to raise them, and you can't do that with this either. But it is just a bad ability. Everything about it hurts your action economy. It doesn't heal anywhere near enough for it to ever be useful. A D4 plus your proficiency bonus is not going to cushion a single attack blow you're going to get. Even at second level, that's not going to save you from a single attack that you get. Casting at higher levels, like I said, the only good thing about Healing Word is that you use it to bring your allies back. That's why it's such a useful spell, and you can't do that with this version of it. So there's nothing about this that is good. My suggestion for it is get rid of the Confession being able to use to cast extra spells. Nope. It's a full caster. Has plenty of spells it can cast. Doesn't need extra spells to be able to cast. This is what I think Afflatus Solace should be. Change the text to at second level. You gain access to the Afflatus Solace Prayer. This prayer taps into the natural ether stored in each person, showing that the actions of the 12 cause ripples that endure for much longer. This prayer must be used on a spell that restores hit points to a target. And I'm going to add one more modifier to that. That requires you to roll dice for those HP, because there's a really easy exploit if I don't put that in. At the start of their turn, for a number of turns equal to your wisdom modifier, the target regains hit points equal to the amount that would have been healed had you rolled the minimum amount on all dice for the initial spell. This healing ends early if either you or the target are reduced to 0 hit points. So this adds a heal over time. Heal over times don't really exist in 5th edition, and I think it is a missed opportunity. I can understand why the entire purpose of 5th edition was to get rid of just the needless complexity and having to track a bunch of different things. And so there are very few things in 5th edition that require you to track things, especially since this particular ability, and I did this on purpose, is not limited to a single target. Theoretically, you could heal someone one turn and then heal another person another turn. You would have 2 instances of this going at the same time. I did that intentionally because I think it's necessary for this to still be useful going forward. And this is literally how you play a hot healer in Final Fantasy XIV. Again, the only healer I have currently I have played thus far is the Astrologian, but I leveled an Astrologian all the way to 80. I ran endgame content with my Astrologian. I loved my Astrologian. I haven't played it in Endwalker yet, so I don't know if the changes are going to make me not like it as much. I'm planning on leveling Sage because I think Sage is amazingly awesome. But the thing with the old version of the Astrologian is they were both heal over time and a shield healer, depending on which stance you were in effectively. And for the most part, I almost exclusively used the heal over time because the shield healing, it didn't work as well unless you had someone else in the group already that was doing hot heals. Which is probably why they changed the Astrologian to work differently. But this is how you play a hot healer in Final Fantasy XIV. Is you just everybody is constantly getting hit with heal over times. When combat starts, the first thing you do is put as many heal over times on your tank as possible, and then as people get hit, you just randomly launch a heal over time on people. That's how I played in World of Warcraft when I was a healer. That's how you play a heal over time. I was a Druid heals way back in Burning Crusade and Wrath of the Lich King, and most of their heals that I was doing were heal over times. That's how you played it. In Star Wars The Old Republic, I played a healer. I played a smuggler healer. And that's what you do. You just launch a bunch of heal over times. That's how you heal in an MMO. So I don't understand why there wasn't even an attempt to add a heal over time to the White Mage, because they were the first heal over time healer. And they're the most well-known, and they're one of the best healers. Like, White Mages rock in Final Fantasy XIV, or at least they did up until Endwalker. I have no idea what the balance is now, because most of the parties I've been in have had Sages, because everyone is leveling Sage if you're healing. So I have no idea how good they are now compared to Sage and with the changes and everything, but it's always been what they've done. They're one of the best healers, so I understand why there was no attempt to do that. And I'm not a huge fan of it not being in 5th edition. Yes, it is a little bit more complex, but there are so many benefits to having a heal over time. The one thing that could be really murky is if someone were able to keep their heal over time despite going unconscious, that would effectively mean heal over time spells become the most powerful thing in the game, because that means that you never have to roll death saves, because all you have to do is put a heal over time and make sure that the person that cast it doesn't lose concentration on it for whatever reason, and that person literally can't die unless a monster specifically targets them and attacks them multiple times while they're unconscious, which I've mentioned before most DMs won't do. So that would be very broken. That's why I mentioned it. It ends early if either the caster goes to 0 hit points or if the target itself goes to 0 hit points, just to keep it from being broken. But yeah, it's a real basic heal over time. I tried to make it as simply described as possible, but for what I'm trying to make it so that it's going to be useful no matter how you do it, it had to be a little bit complicated. And that's basically if you cast Cure Wounds on someone and you add the Afflatus Solace prayer to it. Cure Wounds is a D8 plus your Wisdom modifier. So the initial time when you cast it on your turn, they will get a D8 plus your Wisdom modifier health. However, on subsequent turns, they would get 1 plus your Wisdom modifier health every turn. So if you cast Healing Word at 3rd level, that would be 3d8 plus your Wisdom modifier. That would mean it would be 3 plus your Wisdom modifier, because the lowest number you can roll in a d8 is a 1. And that's how it's meant to be. Again, it's not meant to be super powerful. It's not meant to use the averages or something, because that would make it massively broken. But the ability to just have passive hit points keep healing you over and over again, even with the fact that it is a relatively low amount, those hit points are going to add up. Even at 2nd level, when you get it, that's going to be 3 turns that you're getting it. You are going to get more health from Afflatus Solace than you will from the initial heal. So it does balance it out. It turns into something interesting. It does add one additional thing to track, but I don't see a better way to add a heal over time effect, and that is the White Mage in Final Fantasy XIV, and I think it would be really fun and really interesting. The first thing that came to mind as far as talks about, well, what happens if you add both Reach of the Unseen and Afflatus Solace to something that could start becoming broken. Yeah, it could be if you could do that. However, every prayer requires you to use your bonus action. You only get 1 bonus action per turn. So your bonus action is always, you're only ever going to be able to add 1 prayer. And each subclass will have their own prayers that they can add to spells. And because the prayers are specifically worded as this prayer only affects this kind of spell, and as long as we stick to that method, you can really kind of tailor the class to using certain kinds of spells, because the prayers for the subclass will only work for those spells. So overall, I think this is a much better way. It doesn't require the stupid way of building up random numbers and doubling and no. And it adds something that doesn't exist in D&D right now, and I think that'd be really cool. So, moving on, at 4th level, ability score improvement. We've talked about it a billion times. Don't need to talk about it again. Then we go to 18th level, which is Conservation of Life. Beginning at 18th level, when your hit points are reduced to 0 and you fall unconscious, you release a pulse of healing energy. All allies, excluding yourself within a 30-foot radius, are healed for 2d8 plus your Wisdom ability modifier hit points. This is unaffected by the touch of the Pajal. That's a subclass ability, we don't have to worry about it. This effect only occurs once. You must then finish a long rest to use Conservation of Life again. I like this ability. There's nothing about it I would change other than probably taking out the reference to touch of the Pajal, simply because I haven't gone through these subclasses extensively yet. I haven't started making my suggestions for how to change them yet. But because I just didn't have time to do it yet. I'll do that before the next video. So that'd probably be the only thing I would change is get rid of that, depending on what happens to that ability. Otherwise, this is a cool ability. It's a one and done ability, and I'm fine with it being a one and done ability. It is just a cool ability, especially since one of the things that healers in general in Final Fantasy XIV have access to is the healer limit break. And the LB3, the 3rd level healer limit break, heals the entire raid effectively within a certain distance. But it's generally as long as you as you position your healer in the right spot. It's the whole raid. What it does is it raises everybody in the raid and refills them to full hit points. It is the wipe fixer. It is the one thing that will if you're about to wipe, if you can get a healer LB3 off, you are instantly back to full everything and you are set. That's kind of what I envision this being. And a lot of people would view this as a very kind of defensive thing. Well, at least if I die, then I'm going to help out my allies. I think this can be used offensively really well. Again, the white mage is super squishy. They're not meant to get into combat and start fighting. However, if allies start dropping, the best thing for the white mage to do would be to go in and either provoke an attack of opportunity, put yourself in a situation where you are going to be taken down with whatever happens next. Actively put the white mage in a bad situation. So, when the attack hits, if they knock out the entire party, everybody but the white mage comes back. Like, from a defensive aspect, this is an okay ability. It's not bad, but it's not great either. From an offensive aspect, if the white mage baits an enemy into killing them, or knocking them unconscious, this turns into a massively useful Hail Mary pass. You have people that are dropping too much, this gets all of them back. And a 30-foot radius is a nice range for this to work in. This means most, if not all, of your party will be able to get into it as long as you position yourself in the right place. Everything about this is cool. I like it. Finally, moving to 20th level, you get Graceful Healer. Being at 20th level, you gain 2 confession charges when you roll initiative at the beginning of the battle. So, going back to how confession originally worked. Graceful Healer means you start combat with 2 charges. Confession, you double the number of charges, then you add 1. So, Graceful Healer means that first round, you have 5 of your 6 charges instantly. And then you can use them to cast spells. So it really is, hey, let's just give the white mage extra spells in the most confusing, complicated, pointlessly complex way possible. And I hate it. It's so dumb. And again, with Graceful Healer, we've actually had discussions of this on the subreddits. By the way, link to the subreddit in the description if you want to pick this up. They have a newer version of this. I don't believe any of this has been changed in it, though. They just add the Sage and the Reaper into it. They've had this discussion about there's a number of abilities in this that the solution that has been put forward has been, well, really it should be on the DM to just say, well, that's not how it's meant to be. And the entire argument against how incredibly easy to exploit abilities like this are is, well, the DM should really put some sort of limit, which in my opinion is just poor design. If your design includes, well, the way that we ensure that this isn't abused is we just hope people don't abuse it, that's bad design. The abilities should be written in a way that abusing them requires reading them incorrectly or making really bad calls or things like that. If you are intentionally creating things that are massively simple to abuse and then your solution is, well, you really shouldn't, then that's just bad class design. And again, there is a massively simple way to fix this, which is, and for this, it's not as big a deal because confession charges go away after spending a minute outside of combat. But that's the thing, is you can get into combat with a local roach right before you get into a real combat, and your 2 confessions will already be there. And then you go into combat, you roll initiative again, you'll get another 2 confessions, and then you're almost at full without using your bonus action. So, my way to change it is the same way I always recommend to change it. Beginning at 20th level, if you have no uses of prayer When you roll initiative, you regain 2 uses of prayer. It's really simple. It's really easy. It can't be abused. You can't stack them. It requires you to be completely out of prayers to do it. And that's how I recommend they change this. So, final thoughts. I know there's one person who has already told me they're going to try and defend the mechanics of this class. You can't. 5th edition, I will tell you exactly why you cannot defend this. Because this goes against, not only 5th edition class design in complexity for complexity's sake is bad, this goes against action economy. You have to waste actions so that you can take other actions. There isn't a single ability in 5th edition D&D where you use a bonus action to only gain a resource, because that means you are wasting an action and you are putting your team at a disadvantage. Because the main balancing factor in 5th edition is whichever side has the more things they can do, the more actions, which include move, action, bonus action, reaction. Whichever side has more of those they can do has the advantage. Confession always puts the white mage's team at a disadvantage. You have to burn actions in order to use other actions. That's not how it is. The way I suggest changing it is you use your bonus action to make your action more useful. It adds additional effects to it instead of simply burning actions so that you have the ability to use a different action. And that is the difference. Confession is a bad designed ability. It doesn't work in 5th edition in any way, shape, or form. It goes against action economy. Even if you say, well, complexity, this is required. No, it doesn't. It goes against action economy. Anyone with a white mage on their team will always be at a disadvantage because the white mage has less actions available no matter what you do than any other class. And it's not just hurting the white mage. This is hurting everybody on their team. There's no way to defend this in 5th edition D&D. There's no way really to defend this in any RPG I am currently aware of. There is no ability in Pathfinder. There's no ability in Vampire the Masquerades. None of them that has you doing this complicated. If you have part of this, then you double it and then you add another one, and then it's just needlessly complex, and it goes against action economy. It is a badly designed thing. Doesn't mean I think anyone that likes this is dumb or stupid or anything like that. I am specifically talking about the ability itself, not the people that create it or support it. It's just bad. I will point out right now, Soren has made an incredible product. Rifle Avenger, I would assume, I believe he's in the credits in here somewhere. I assume Rifle Avenger has helped Soren write this. This is an unbelievably amazing supplement. The just vast amounts of stuff that is in here is impressive. A fair amount of it doesn't work, but that doesn't make it any less impressive that it was created and it had an internal consistency. A lot of the issues that come from this come from just not understanding 5th edition really well. Again, a lot of the points that I bring up are not stuff that a lot of people are aware of until they start actually writing content for 5th edition. And I was lucky. One of the first playtesters of my custom class is an official playtester for Wizards of the Coast, and they sat me down and said, "By the way, this class doesn't get their defining features until 3rd level. You need to change that." And I said, "What are defining features?" And he explained the guidance that they got from Wizards of the Coast. This is how 5th edition works, the defining features aspect. This is something that they considered when creating 5th edition. This is not something that I have come up with out of my own brain. This is from Wizards of the Coast indirectly through one of their playtesters. This is how 5th edition works. I was lucky that I got that insight extremely early in my 5th edition career, and I've been able to use it ever since. Not everyone is aware of that. It's not something that Wizards of the Coast talks about, I think, almost at all. I don't think they have ever used the term defining feature. That's a term that I personally have coined. So yeah, this is not to disparage Soren or Rifle Avenger or anyone else that helped make any of this stuff. It's all amazing. I'm saying Confession doesn't just not work. It is actively detrimental to anyone that has a white mage in their party. It is a bad ability. There is no defense of it. It hurts. Other than that, the base version of the white mage, because it relied on Confession so much, is just a bad class. Having a white mage on your team makes your team worse. And again, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that it seems like the class was designed so that they would spend all of their time healing, which is not fun to do in D&D. To the point where they're given almost every summoning spell in the game simply so that they can do some damage while they're doing nothing but healing. It's not fun. You don't want to do that. So, with my suggestions to kind of change things, adding a heal over to time, going from Confession to the prayer system, this turns it into a much more active class. They get to do a lot more cool things. Reach of the Unseen can be used on offensive spells. Things like Inflict Wounds. And other things of that nature can be used with Reach of the Unseen. Afflatus Solace gives them the ability to effectively heal every turn without having to cast a healing spell every turn. That gives them a heal over time thing, which allows them to do other stuff that is fun to do. Now again, there's nothing in the class that is offensive, as in allows them to do damage. So the only offensive abilities they're going to have is in their spell list. So I think the spell needs to be revisited. First of all, take out most of the summoning spells because they don't make sense. And I think they were built on the idea that this class is going to be mainly summoning and then only healing on their turn, which doesn't work in 5th edition. Add in a few more offensive spells, probably from the cleric spell list, so that every subclass can do something other than casting healing spells every turn, and this turns into a pretty interesting class. As it's written, not only would I not allow this to be played at my table, I would actively recommend against anyone ever playing this class. Again, it is detrimental to your party to have a white mage in it. And for anyone that is going to bring up the argument, well, I played in a game and we had a white mage and it was super fun. I have seen people play monks as damage dealers and they had super fun. It still meant that the rest of the party had to pick up the slack for the monk. There are a lot of different ways that you can have fun in D&D. I'm not saying it's impossible to have fun with this class. I'm saying as it is designed, it is playing D&D in hard mode because you are handicapping your party. That's all it is. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, if you enjoyed this, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell icon, turn notifications on, and in the comments down below, just say nice things about Soren and Rifle Avenger and anyone else that has worked on this. As much as, especially in the last few classes I've been doing, I do harp pretty heavily on the classes themselves. It's because there is so much potential in this, and it is such a cool idea that seeing things that actively work against and actively hurt people that want to play these really cool classes is upsetting to me. And none of this is anyone who contributed to this fault. Again, I have a unique perspective on this because of my extensive experience in 5th edition and the fact that I got some of the best advice ever the first time I tried. I got to effectively get critiqued by masters on my first try. That's not something that everyone has access to, and I have used every bit of that knowledge in trying to turn this into something that I think would be really fun and interesting, and is balanced with other classes. So, again, that's all for me today, and I'll see you guys next time. All right, bye bye.